They called me a nobody, while slicing steak I paid for. My sister Harper's promotion dinner was full of crisp uniforms, over-polished smiles, and relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years. I sat there in a tailored black coat, no rank, no name tag, holding my fork like a weapon. I knew what was coming. Right between dessert and the second toast, my father, retired Colonel Richard Maddox, raised his glass and said loudly enough for the room to hush. To those who serve with honor, and those who serve their egos. Laughter, coughs. Even Harper smirked. I chewed on dry silence. No one met my eyes. I wasn't just left out of the family, I'd been erased. Then the door opened. A man in full dress blues walked in. Not a glance for my father, not for my sister. He walked straight to me, stood at attention, and said, "General Maddox, ma'am." Welcome back. Every fork froze mid-air. Every truth I buried began to breathe again. And that's where my story begins. No one moved. Not even Harper, who had just spent 10 minutes recounting her field exercise medal like it was the Medal of Honor itself. My father's hand, still raised in the air, trembled just enough to betray him. My mother stared down at her glass like she was trying to disappear into the condensation ring it left behind. Colonel Elias Shaw gave me a sharp nod. "We received your last analysis brief." "Impressive work, ma'am. The committee's reviewing it this week." That was the moment everything cracked. A room full of people who had spent 5 years pretending I no longer existed suddenly remembered they'd once sent me off in full dress blues with a flag pinned to my chest. Harper shifted in her chair. "That was a while ago," she said quickly. "She's not in active duty anymore." Shaw didn't look at her. "Rank doesn't fade, Lieutenant. Reputation does, but only if we let it." And then he left, just like that. The silence he left behind was the loudest thing I'd heard in years. Afterward, no one spoke to me directly. Not during the speeches. Not during dessert. Not during the staged family photos Harper insisted on. I stood off to the side, watching her beam in the spotlight I used to know like second skin. But what no one knew was this. The truth had started to surface. 3 days before the dinner, I'd received an encrypted message. Operation Ember signal resurfaced. "Your name's on the source logs. Someone's digging. Be ready." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I'd spent half a decade living in the shadows of a decision that saved lives, but cost me mine. Now, someone was dragging that shadow back into daylight. And I wasn't going to let them write the ending without me. Fort Calhoun hadn't changed much. Still tucked behind the ridgeline like a secret, still guarded by chain-link fences and faded signs that warned more than they welcomed. The gate scanner didn't recognize my ID at first. I had to buzz the entry booth. "Name?" the young officer asked, barely looking up. "Maddox." "Lieutenant General, retired." A pause, then a blink. "You're her." Her, not ma'am, not general, just her. He handed me a visitor badge, blank, laminated, unceremonious. I clipped it on without comment and stepped inside the place that once saluted when I breathed. The halls were quieter now, too clean. Like a museum with exhibits removed. I wandered toward the eastern wing, where the Hall of Service used to be. A gallery of framed photos, soldiers in combat gear, commissioning ceremonies, medals, memorials. I stopped where I remembered mine had been. Now, in that exact spot hung a landscape photo, mountains and mist. Pretty, generic, forgettable. No plaque, no caption, just absence. I turned and spotted my old commanding officer's portrait still hung at the far end, General Nathaniel Sykes. He once called me the spine of tactical ethics. He also signed off on the review that stripped my name from the after-action report of Operation Ember Signal. In the corner stood the memorial case, glass shelves lined with folded flags and citations. There was one for Captain Rowe, Sergeant Melton, even a junior analyst who had served 3 months. Nothing for me. I asked a clerk nearby, "Was the Maddox commendation file moved?" She blinked. "Maddox? You mean Harper's service folder?" I didn't correct her. What would be the point? Instead, I walked down to the records archive. Quiet steps, faint hum of fluorescent lights, same smell of old paper and cold air. In the far right drawer, where all officer records AM were stored, I searched for my file. It wasn't there, just an empty slot. No label, no dust, it wasn't forgotten. It had been removed, and the silence around it, that was deliberate. I stood for a moment, hands still resting on the edge of the drawer, and whispered to no one. They didn't just erase me, they archived me alive. But the thing about silence is, once you survive it long enough, you learn how to weaponize it, and I was done being quiet. Well, they called it Operation Ember Signal, a reconsolidation effort in the northeastern corridor, but anyone who read between the lines knew it was a scramble, a withdrawal cloaked as strategy. I was Chief Strategic Officer on site, reporting directly to Central Command through satellite relay. We had 12 active units on the ground, hundreds of civilians caught in crossfire zones, and intel flooding in so fast it blurred into noise. Then came the directive. Strike Sector Delta. Time window, 600-610. Confirmed hostile buildup. Civilian count, minimal. I remember staring at the field report. The numbers didn't add up. The satellite imagery didn't match. I called in my own analysts, quietly. We found them. Civilians. Dozens. Families sheltering in a makeshift hospital. No visible combatants. No weapons. Just bodies hiding from war. I contacted HQ, raised a flag. The reply came cold and coded. Operational urgency supersedes caution. Execute. I hesitated. Then I issued a new command, one that would later disappear from every official log. Hold position. No fire. Redirect surveillance. Do not engage. At Zo 603, enemy artillery missed us by minutes, not because of their error, but because we waited. Because I disobeyed. 300 soldiers lived, so did every civilian in that sector. But when the fallout came, when higher-ups demanded answers for the delay, they didn't point fingers at faulty intel. They pointed at me, said I'd misjudged, hesitated, jeopardized mission integrity, and I let them. Because calling out the real source, General Cole Rayner, would have meant dragging my team through hearings, testimonies, media storms, careers ruined, families interrogated. So I signed the silence, let the record show. Command error resulted in strategic deviation. My rank held, but my record cracked. Whispers started, invitations stopped. My face disappeared from strategy panels. Then one day the retirement papers arrived, not requested, just issued. I packed my office in 6 boxes and walked out without ceremony. But I never regretted the call, because honor isn't about obedience. It's about accountability. And deep down, I always knew if that truth ever surfaced again, someone would try to bury it harder, which is exactly what was happening now. My father hosted a backyard Veterans Day potluck that year, his way of staying connected to the community, he said. In truth, it was his old command circle catching up over barbecue, beer, and bragging rights. Harper arrived in her National Guard dress uniform, shoes shined to a mirror, ribbons aligned with surgical precision. She walked like she belonged. And for them, she did. When I arrived, no one offered a handshake. My name wasn't on a name tag. No reserved seat. Aunt Carol gestured to a folding chair near the water cooler. Sweetheart, would you mind sliding over? That seat's for Lieutenant Harper Maddox. Of course it was. I sat near the auxiliary table, where forgotten potato salads and unsupervised children lingered. A display board stood nearby. Dad in Vietnam, Grandpa in Normandy, Harper at basic training graduation. Nowhere was I. I scanned the photos twice before asking Mom, casually, "Where's the old West Point shot of me?" She didn't even pause while arranging deviled eggs. "Oh, that one." It felt outdated. I figured a recent family photo would feel more relevant. The frame had been replaced with a holiday portrait from 5 years ago, before Ember's signal, before the silence, no uniform. No trace. Later, during a lull in the music, a man I didn't recognize approached me. Late 60s, stocky build, with the kind of posture that never quite retires. "Thatcher?" he asked. I nodded. "Avery Maddox now." He didn't blink. "I think I saw your name on an internal dispatch once. Ember signal, right?" I stiffened. "You rerouted the unit at Sector Delta. Hell of a decision." "Saved a friend of mine." My throat tightened. "You remember that?" He chuckled. "People think erasing a name erases what happened. But those of us still breathing because of you, we remember." Then he walked off, like it was nothing. But for me, it wasn't nothing. It was everything. Because in that moment, amid cold chicken wings and fading family pride, I realized something had survived. A memory, a truth. A witness. And if one survived, maybe more did. Maybe silence wasn't permanent. Just waiting to be broken. The message came the next morning. Ember signal leak confirmed. Source logs traceable. Check device ID NM12HC9. It wasn't signed, no subject line, just raw intel. But that string, NM12HC9, I knew it. That was the hardware tag for a comms tablet issued through the National Guard's Cyber Liaison Program, specifically to junior command staff stationed at Mid-Atlantic Command. I opened the personnel registry. There it was, Lieutenant Harper Maddox. I stared at the screen until the text blurred. Could it be spoofed, faked? But the encryption level said otherwise. This wasn't an outside attack. It was an internal action from a secure guard-issued terminal. Harper had accessed the archive. And she'd leaked it. I didn't want to believe it, but denial doesn't fix damage. So I drove to her base without calling ahead. Badge scan, guest pass. No salute. I found her in the break room, scrolling her phone, feet propped on a chair. She looked up. "Avery, you okay?" I didn't sit. I slid a printed log across the table. "Recognize this device ID?" Her eyes flicked to the paper, then to me. Her jaw clenched. "You leaked it." No denial. No apology, just silence then. "I was tired," she said quietly. "Tired of people whispering about you. Acting like you were some kind of myth. I worked my ass off and still they compared me to someone who wasn't even here." "You wanted to erase me?" Her eyes welled. She looked away. "I didn't want to destroy you. I just wanted to be seen first, for once." The room pulsed with quiet rage and heartbreak. I didn't shout. I didn't flinch. I just said what hurt the most. "You think I don't know what it feels like to be erased?" She looked back, stricken. "I was wrong," she said, voice shaking. "But people still see you, even when you're not in the room. I wanted that." I nodded slowly. "I didn't come here for revenge, Harper, but don't mistake silence for weakness. You triggered something. Something bigger than both of us." Her voice cracked. "Can I fix it?" "You can help," I said, standing. "But you don't get to decide how this ends anymore." As I walked away, I felt it, something shift. This wasn't just about a career anymore. It was about truth, family, redemption, and what happened when all three collided. If you're still here, still listening, thank you. Not everyone sticks around for stories like mine. But trust me, what's coming next, it's the part they really didn't want you to hear. So if you haven't yet, hit that like button. Subscribe, because when the truth explodes, you'll want to be right here when it happens, ready to see what they buried even deeper. Let's go. Sarah Whittam hadn't changed much. Still kept her hair tied in a looped bun like the world was always one disaster away. Still wore that analyst squint, half doubt, half dare. We met at a retired data archive on the edge of Quantico, officially decommissioned, unofficially alive if you knew the backdoor logins. Your passphrase still work? She asked, handing me a dusty terminal. Wraith 7, I said. Muscle memory did the rest. The screen blinked. Then opened. Dozens of folders, most marked restricted. One blinked red. EMB Sig Prio, audio pending. Sarah leaned in. That's the one. Inside, a series of operation files, field orders, briefing logs, and at the bottom, an audio file labeled 5A Prot Override. I clicked, static. Then, reprioritize Sector Delta. Civilian risk acknowledged. Acceptable. Proceed per strike protocol 5A. I don't care what Langston's imagery says. Execute. The voice was unmistakable. General Cole Rayner. Clear, authoritative, cold. He'd overridden chain of command, ignored intel, ordered fire on a civilian-rich zone, then buried it under protocol and silence. Sarah exhaled sharply. They pinned that on you. I nodded, but my throat was locked. And they got away with it, I finally said. Until now. She copied the file to a secure drive and slid it across the table. You sure you want to use this? I looked at her. I didn't come this far to whisper. We sealed the drive in a shockproof case. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked. Froze. Security log just flagged someone accessing your old clearance credentials from inside the guard network. My blood chilled. They're watching us, Sarah nodded. And they're not waiting to ask nicely. I stood. We have to move. She grabbed her bag. Where? To Arlington. Sarah paused. You're going after Rayner directly? I looked down at the drive in my hand. The weight of it felt heavier than war. No, I said, I'm going after the lie. The summit was in 2 days, Arlington. Military Strategic Command Summit. VIPs, diplomats, brass from every branch, and at the center of it all, General Cole Rayner. Keynote speaker, the man who rewrote my history. I stared at the schematics Sarah had pulled, blueprints of the convention hall, security rotations, uplink routes. There's a soft point, she said, pointing. Rear access, north maintenance corridor. Low traffic. Uplink panel connects to the room's AV. And once we're in? I asked. We inject the audio through the live stream relay. One push. Whole room hears it. So does everyone watching online. Harper stood silently by the window. She turned. Let me do it. I raised an eyebrow. You think they'll let you waltz in during security lockdown? She nodded. They know I'm under review. Still active. If I show up with a reinstatement request, dressed low rank, no rank, it won't raise flags. I hesitated. Last time she interfered, she nearly buried us both. But this time, her voice was different. Not defensive, just clear. I want to make this right, she said. Let me wear the badge this time. I nodded. All right. You're the inside. I'm the outside. Sarah handed us the encrypted drive. Small, black, silent. Inside it, Rayner's voice. His downfall, our leverage. We built the switch uplink in a van 3 blocks from the summit. Satellite relay, thermal tracker, everything disguised inside an HVAC unit. At 1500 hours, Harper entered through the north gate. Plain uniform, just another name on a clipboard. The device was hidden behind her ID badge. The relay set to auto-fire once signal stabilized. I watched the screen as her locator dot moved toward the control terminal. Inside that building were generals who'd erased me, but outside was a woman about to make them hear what silence had cost. The main hall of the summit glowed under banners and brass. General Cole Rayner stood at the podium, his uniform a stitched-up monument of power, rows of medals that reflected more politics than valor. Cameras streamed live. "Today," Rayner began, "we reassert the integrity of American command. In an age of disinformation, loyalty is our backbone." His words tasted of varnish and varnished lies. In the van, I hovered over the control console. Harper's locator had stopped. She was in position. The uplink showed green. I whispered into the mic, "Ready?" A single vibration pulsed in reply. I pressed activate. The room's audio flickered. Then, his voice. "Reprioritize Sector Delta. Civilian risk acknowledged. Acceptable. Proceed. Protocol 5A. I don't care what Langston's imagery says. Execute." Gasps, then silence. Not the respectful kind, the shocked, dead-weight, blood-left-the-face kind. Heads turned. Some stood. A colonel in the front row looked like he'd swallowed glass. Rayner froze mid-step. His mic cut, his jaw tensed. That audio is manufactured," he barked. "Deepfake, enemy tech, you're being manipulated." But the voice, his voice, was too familiar. Too exact. He knew it, the audience knew it. And then I stepped in. Not from the shadows, but straight down the center aisle. Harper appeared beside the AV terminal, hands folded behind her back. Calm, resolved. The lights caught me as I spoke, loud enough to pierce every excuse still hanging in the air. "I was there." I received that order, and I disobeyed it because I knew it was wrong. Rayner spun toward me. "You have no authority here." "No," I said. "But I have something you don't," he sneered. "What's that?" I looked across the crowd, locked eyes with cadets, officers, strategists, some who remembered, others who didn't. Survivors. No one moved. Then a junior officer stood. Then another. And another, not shouting, not protesting. Just standing, one by one. The truth didn't roar that day. It rose like dawn. Rayner didn't scream, didn't argue. When the MPs escorted him out through the side doors, he walked like the floor still belonged to him. But his hands trembled. Behind the curtain, Harper stood frozen. The light from the projector washed over her like absolution and guilt all at once. She turned to me. "They're going to suspend me." I nodded. "They should." She swallowed hard. "But they don't have to destroy you," I added. "Not if I speak first." Later, in the inquiry room, walls gray, table metallic, I faced the panel. I gave my statement with no script. I authorized Avery Maddox to access legacy data from Operation Ember Signal. The decision, the protocol breach, if there is one, rests with me alone. The room stilled. One board member, stern-eyed, leaned in. "You're no longer in active command, General." "I'm not," I replied, "but I remember what command should feel like." And this was it. There was silence. Then quiet agreement. The verdict came 2 days later. Rayner, charged with falsifying military intelligence, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming. Immediate dismissal. Investigation pending for prior campaigns. Harper, formally reprimanded but retained in active service. Me? My rank reinstated. My commendations restored. My name returned to the archive. And yet, when the offer came to resume my former role at Strategic Command, I declined. I'd already climbed that mountain once. I knew what the view cost. Instead, I returned to the one place that hadn't asked for my silence. The classroom. Because it was never about reclaiming power. It was about proving that truth still had a place in systems built on forgetting. And this time, I wasn't alone. The classroom was smaller than I remembered. Old whiteboard, flickering lights, desks carved with initials of cadets long gone. No medals on the wall, just questions waiting to be asked. I didn't wear my rank, not because I lost it, but because I didn't need it to be heard. The board behind me read, "Moral intelligence, what happens when orders are wrong?" No one saluted, no one stood, but every eye was fixed. I told them a story, not of strategy or combat, but of silence, of being erased because I made a choice, and how I chose again to speak, even when the room wanted me gone. After class, one cadet lingered behind. He didn't speak, just slid a note across the desk. I used to think courage was volume. Now I know it's showing up, even when no one claps. I held that note longer than I meant to. Because that truth? It's what saved me, not the systems, not the reinstatement. The choice to be remembered for the right reasons. Weeks later, I returned to Fort Calhoun. In the archive hall, beneath dusted lights and layers of institutional forgetting, my photo had returned. Same pose, same eyes, but now it stood beside Harper's. Not above, not below, equal. At last. My mother stood nearby, voice trembling. "You never needed us to be proud." "But we should have said it anyway." I didn't answer. Some words come too late. Others. They arrive exactly when someone needs to hear them. Outside the Academy lecture hall, a new photo appeared. Me, Harper. A handful of cadets, young, determined, unafraid. Underneath, someone had scribbled in permanent marker, "She didn't fight for attention. She fought to remind us silence has weight too." If you're still here, still listening, thank you. Now tell me this. Have you ever been erased from a story that was yours to tell? Have you ever stayed silent when everything in you screamed to speak? If so, drop a below or tell me what you wish you'd said, not ready to comment. That's okay. Just hit like, so I know you're out there, listening. Healing, and maybe rewriting your own ending too, because truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it just refuses to stay buried. Have you ever been in a room where the truth was unwelcome, but you held it anyway? What did you do? Stay silent? Speak up? If this story reminded you of someone, or some moment, you've never said out loud, drop a comment, hit like, or share it with someone who needs to hear it too.